There's no song this week for my little series. Sheer and I were going to do a happy number, but for the last few days I haven't been able to take my eyes off the news. I'm no expert on Ukraine or nuclear weapons or Russia. I can only say what this moment feels like to me. And it feels like the biggest geopolitical event since the fall of the Soviet Union. It feels like what was impossible since the end of World War II is now possible again, and we are skating inches or a small series of escalations from being directly involved. It feels like Ukraine, whose principal crime was to seek alliance with NATO, is so thinly removed from a fight directly with the West that as they go to war, they're taking bullets meant for us. And it feels sickening that we can't help them. When I read the news out of Ukraine right now, I cry often enough. When we see ordinary people lining up at community centers to receive their rifles, and when the state starts instructing housewives on how to make Molotov cocktails, and when we hear about young people ready to die in the resistance and children living in parking garages to avoid shelling, I can't help but imagine the streets where I live. Western governments have made clear that they view Ukraine and its 44 million people as an acceptable sacrifice to avoid a direct war with Russia. It is viciously difficult to assess the wisdom of that choice. It is a depressing and a general truth that a mature conscience is less driven by impulse than analysis. It's not the goodness in our hearts that counts, but whether we did the work of analyzing the 17th consequence of our actions when we took them. It does not do to feed a village by burning down a rainforest. It does not do to save a life by putting 1,000 others in jeopardy, and it does not do to fight a land army threatening to use its nuclear arsenal if it is opposed. But in my heart, which is not well adapted to life as a chess computer, that analysis is deeply enervating. It feels as though we've created a world in which moral action is impossible. And perhaps this is true. Mutually assured destruction has to condone all kinds of local atrocities. We've created this fiction that somehow a red line from game theory is holding the world from destruction, but it is impossible to say what that line might be. It feels as arbitrary to assume that it is NATO's borders as it is a small genocide, because who would not give up Newfoundland or New England to a hostile power if the alternative were world annihilation, really? I wonder if we simply don't ask the obvious questions, because to look too soberly at our situation would reveal that there is no line, there is no invisible hand, there's nothing there but the evident absurdity. If NATO is now attacked, and President Biden has implied that this is Putin's eventual goal, to reunite all of the little Soviet republics that are now a part of NATO, then the US and Canada would be at war with Russia. As far as I can see, this could happen next week. There was a journalist, Gunther Anders, who was writing on the rise of the hydrogen bomb in the 1950s, who referred to this period of human history wherein we have developed the tools to annihilate our planet but have not yet deployed them as the reprieve. When I first read that term, the reprieve, it took a moment to sink in for me that implication that all time is borrowed time when the tools to destroy the world have entered the world, and we are only lacking sufficient malice or madness or incompetence to use them. We've known this, but we don't take nuclear disarmament as a serious geopolitical goal anymore. Not seriously enough, for instance, to use the same arsenal of sanctions that we're deploying this week to try and coerce countries into denuclearizing during peacetime when there's still a chance to do so. I wonder how pivotally short-sighted that is. I wonder, for all the wars to come, if we've adopted rules where the aggressor wins when he takes everything up to the point where his counterparty is willing to risk annihilation just to engage. I fear that those rules favor a Putin every time. And I hope, in some bafflement, in some awe and despair at what we might lose the next time an evil man wants to make strategic threats. I hope that after Ukraine, we might have a renewed focus on denuclearization. Seeing how the concessions to avoid nuclear war can include an entire country of 44 million people, and that no matter how necessary or inevitable that concession may seem to us now, it will haunt us. I hope that if we are far-seeing enough to perceive the rules of the nuclear game during wartime, that we can be far-seeing enough in peacetime to change them.